am standing in the middle of my childhood living room right now, staring at my father while he laughs in my face, and I honestly don't know if I've ever felt a betrayal this deep. I've spent the last 12 years of my life believing in a safety net that didn't actually exist, and now that I'm 30 years old with a wife and a baby on the way, the floor has completely dropped out from under me. I need you to listen to this and tell me, am I the crazy one here for expecting my parents to keep their word? Or did they just spend a decade legally robbing me of my future? Was I wrong for trusting my own flesh and blood with every cent I earned since I was 18? Or is my father as heartless as he seems right now? Please, just tell me if you would have done the same thing, because I feel like my entire world just turned into a cruel joke. To understand how I got to this point, you have to go back to the day I graduated high school. My parents, David and Linda, have always been old school when it comes to money and work ethic. My dad worked in construction management, and my mom was a paralegal, so they weren't poor, but they were incredibly frugal. The day I turned 18, my dad sat me down at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and a calculator. He told me that as long as I lived under his roof, I had to pay rent. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I had landed a decent job at a local manufacturing plant right out of school, making good money for a teenager. My dad told me that the rent would be $1,000 a month. Now, for an 18-year-old living in a medium-sized town in 2014, that was a lot. It was basically half my take-home pay at the time. But there was a catch that made me feel like the luckiest kid alive. My dad looked me dead in the eye and said, "Son, we don't actually need your money, but you need to learn how to be a man and how to budget. So every month you pay us this $1,000, we're going to put it into a high-yield savings account. When you're ready to buy your first house or when you get married, we'll hand the whole thing back to you as a massive down payment. It's a forced savings plan." I remember feeling so relieved. I watched my friends blow their paychecks on car parts, video games, and expensive clothes, while I dutifully handed over my $1,000 check on the first of every month. It became a ritual. I'd walk into the kitchen, hand the check to my mom. She'd give me a hug and tell me how proud she was of my discipline, and that would be that. I stayed in that house for a long time. I liked my job, I liked my mom's cooking, and honestly, the idea of that house fund growing every month was addictive. As the years went by, my salary increased, and so did my rent. By the time I was 24, my dad bumped it up to $1,200, claiming that inflation was up and I should be saving more anyway. I didn't argue. In my head, I was just building a bigger empire for my future self. I did the math constantly. 12,000 a year, then 14,000 a year. By the time I hit my late 20s, I knew there had to be well over $100,000 sitting in that account. I met my wife, Sarah, 3 years ago. When things got serious, I told her about the arrangement. She was skeptical at first, asking if I'd ever actually seen the bank statements. I told her no, but why would I? These are my parents. They've always been stable, they've always been there for me, and they were the ones who suggested it in the first place. Sarah eventually came around to the idea, thinking it was a genius move by my parents to ensure we had a head start in this insane housing market. We got married last year in a small, low-budget ceremony because we wanted to keep our personal savings for the furniture and moving costs of our future home. My parents were there, smiling and toastings to our future, never once mentioning the money, but I figured they were just waiting for the right moment. Well, that moment came last week. Sarah is 4 months pregnant, and we finally found the perfect house. It's a 4-bedroom place with a big backyard, close to a good school. It's everything we wanted, but the market is brutal, and we needed a massive down payment to keep the monthly mortgage manageable. I sat down and did the final tally. Over 12 years, with the increases and the steady payments, I had handed over exactly $144,000 to my parents. I went over to their house yesterday, feeling like $1,000,000. I had the listing for the house on my phone and a huge smile on my face. I sat my dad down in his recliner and my mom was in the kitchen making tea. I told them the news about the house and said, "Well, Dad, I think it's finally time. I'm ready for that rent money back. It's going to make our lives so much easier with the baby coming." The silence that followed was the coldest thing I've ever experienced. My dad didn't reach for a checkbook. He didn't smile. He just looked at me, then he started to chuckle. Then that chuckle turned into a full-blown laugh. He looked at my mom and said, "Linda, can you believe this? He actually thinks we kept it." My heart hit my shoes. I asked him what he meant, and he told me that the savings account was a lesson, not a literal bank account. He told me that the lesson was learning to live without that money so I wouldn't be a spendthrift. When I asked where the $144,000 was, he shrugged and said they used it. They used it for their vacations, for the new roof on their house, for the boat sitting in the driveway that I thought they'd bought with their retirement funds. He told me, "You lived here, you ate our food, you used the electricity. That was rent, son. You don't get rent back from a landlord, do you?" I was stunned. I reminded him of the specific promise he made when I was 18. I reminded him how many times he'd told me throughout my 20s that I was investing in my future, every time I wrote those checks. He just waved his hand and said I was being entitled, and that he provided me with a roof over my head, and that should be enough. He even had the audacity to say that if I was a real man, I would have saved my own money on top of the rent I was paying him. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. I was looking at a man who had effectively lied to me for over a decade to fund his own lifestyle, while I lived frugally to build a future that he just admitted didn't exist. Before I tell you what happened next and how I decided to handle this betrayal, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you walk away and never speak to them again, or would you find a way to get what's yours? I stood up from that chair, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see my father. I saw a con artist. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just asked him one more time, very calmly, "So you're telling me that the $144,000 is gone? And you have no intention of honoring the agreement we had for the last 12 years?" He just smirked and told me to grow up and get out of his house if I was going to have an attitude. So I left. But I didn't go home to cry. I went home to my home office and started digging. You see, my dad isn't as smart as he thinks he is. For the last 5 years, since I got a promotion at the plant, I've been handling all the administrative paperwork for his small side business, a consulting firm he runs for construction safety. Because I'm his son, he gave me full access to his business accounts, his tax filings, and his personal records so I could help him out and learn the ropes. As I started looking through the files, I realized something. My dad hadn't been reporting the rent I paid him as income. To the IRS, that $144,000 didn't exist. He had been taking my checks, cashing them, and moving the money through his business account as reimbursements or just straight cash under the table to avoid paying taxes on it. Not only that, but I found records of several other creative accounting choices he'd made over the years that were, let's just say, highly illegal. I spent all night compiling every single check I'd ever written him. I kept the carbons and the digital images from my bank and cross-referencing them with his tax returns. It was a slam dunk. The next morning, I didn't call him. I sent him a single email with a PDF attachment of all the evidence I'd gathered. I told him that he had 48 hours to transfer $144,000 into my account, or I would be sending this entire file to the IRS and the state tax board. I told him that I didn't care if he had to sell the boat, the truck, or the house itself. I wanted my money back. 2 hours later, my mom called me sobbing. She called me a monster and said I was trying to ruin my father's life and put them on the street. She said they didn't have the cash on hand because they'd spent it on their lifestyle and helping family, which I knew was a lie. I told her that they had ruined my life first by stealing 12 years of my labor and lying to my face while I tried to build a life for her future grandchild. I told her the clock was ticking. My dad tried to call me next, blustering and threatening to disown me. I told him he already did that when he laughed at me. I told him that if he didn't pay, I wasn't just going to the IRS. I was going to talk to a lawyer about a civil suit for breach of a verbal contract, using my mom as a witness since she was in the room when the deal was made. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. By the end of the day, I received a notification from my bank. $144,000 had been wired into my account. I don't know where he got it, maybe a home equity loan or a secret stash, and I don't care. Sarah and I put the down payment on the house that afternoon, but the aftermath has been brutal. My parents have told the entire extended family that I extorted them and that I'm a greedy son who is dead to them. My aunts and uncles are blowing up my phone, telling me I should be ashamed of myself for threatening my own parents with jail time over rent. They don't seem to care about the 12 years of lies or the fact that my parents were essentially using me as a personal piggy bank. My wife and I are now settled into our new home, and it's beautiful, but it feels a bit hollow knowing the cost of the bridge I had to burn to get here. I have a baby coming in 5 months who will likely never know their grandparents, and honestly, after seeing who they really are, I think that might be for the best. I learned a very expensive and painful lesson. Blood doesn't mean anything when it comes to greed, and the people you think are protecting you might just be the ones waiting for you to let your guard down. I got my money back, but I lost my family, and while I don't regret getting what I earned, the weight of it is something I'll carry for a long time. Was I the villain for using the truth against them, or did I just finally stand up for myself against a decade of manipulation? I don't think there's a right answer, but I know I can look my child in the eye and know I provided for them. Like this video if you were on my side, and think I did the right thing to protect my family's future. Subscribe for more stories like this, where we dive into the craziest family dramas and the reality of the people we think we know. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. I really want to know if you think I went too far or if you would have reported them too. I'll see you all in the next story.